The Paper 3 essay is a great opportunity to show what you know and pick the topics that you are confident to write about. However, the average mark is fairly consistent, around 13 to 14 marks every year. And the mode is 15 because students make the same mistakes regardless of the title. I've seen lots of advice online about how to write the essay, and I've seen some conflicting advice. So I want to set the record straight in this video and correct some of those misconceptions. First, we will review a model of an average multistructural mid-level band essay. We'll mark it together like an examiner would so you can understand why it hasn't achieved more marks. And then we'll refine it to elevate the essay into the top band. Then you can recall what you've learned by marking another paragraph yourself. So here are some fundamentals of the essay that you may be familiar with already. We have a synoptic title, synoptic meaning a comprehensive view of a whole subject. The title will almost certainly ask you to discuss the importance of something. The title we are going to discuss today is the importance of energy transfers in and between organisms. To even potentially access above 15 marks, you need to pick 4 areas of the specification relevant to the title. We'll discuss in more depth how to plan your essay in another video, but you do need to know how to make sure the 4 separate topics are different areas of the specification. We can clearly see these 2 topics are different areas of the specification by their reference number. So you can't write about 3 different species gas exchange system for 3 of your paragraphs because they are the same part of the specification as denoted by their reference number. So each of your 4 topics must show the following. First of all, clear links to the title. I need you to imagine someone takes the title off your essay and reads it. Have you used enough words from the question stem when discussing that they could guess your essay title? You must also show relevant recall of detailed A-level content linked to the title for each topic chosen. They call this Assessment Objective 1, or AO1 for short. We will call this AO1 recall. For each paragraph of recall, you must then show discussion of the wider importance of it to the essay title. And they call this AO2, Assessment Objective 2, Application. Try to remember the meanings of AO1 recall and AO2 application, which we will call discussion, as it communicates more clearly what they want. Now, the banding descriptors for the marking levels for AQA in the actual mark schemes are rather wordy, so I've produced a simplified summary here. So we are obviously aiming for top band. Now, you can only access the top of the top band if you have written a whole paragraph of off-spec content. And we aren't going to focus on that today, as most students attempting it don't reach it because their essay gets capped at a lower mark for other mistakes, either not using enough A-level terminology, but most often because they've included a scientific error in their writing. We will look at off-spec content in another video. So we can see here that just 1 error caps your mark at 20 and 2 errors caps your mark at 15, regardless of how much amazing recall and discussion you have done with A-level terminology. 2 slip-ups and 15 is your max. So please do read your work back as you write. We call this metacognition, and ensure you pick topics you are confident in using the terminology on. You will find videos on the most common errors on the SciBrite channel. So what is a significant error and what is a minor error? A minor error could be classed as a slip of a pen, but doesn't fundamentally change the meaning of what you are trying to communicate. A significant error is an error which suggests a lack of understanding of the concept. So here are some other don'ts. Don't make scientific errors. Don't write at GCSE level. It's very easy to waffle without depth. No introduction or conclusion. You will see advice online saying that they did and they got 25 out of 25. However, it definitely wasn't their introduction or conclusion that got them that mark. I can tell you that with absolute certainty. There is no credit for them. They normally don't contain any additional A-level depth information that isn't discussed elsewhere in the essay, and that is what you are marked on. The only credit you could get for an introduction is if you've included A-level terminology not used elsewhere in the essay, but that really not ought to happen. And my final don't is another one that I hear conflicting advice on. You do not need to find a way to connect your paragraphs on from one another. I hear this all the time from my students that they went on a course and they were told this. I can categorically tell you there is no expectation to connect your paragraphs to each other. However, they must all link directly back to the title using words from the question stem. So then by default, they are all connected. If you try to connect your paragraphs with a waffly, tenuous link, it won't be credited, and also potentially you've wasted time and tried to pick topics that you feel confident to link, but less confident that you can use the terminology on. So here is our model essay, The Importance of Energy Transfers in and Between Organisms. Now I'm going to show you 4 paragraphs, and I've tried to illustrate the 4 common styles of problem paragraph that are costing students marks. Here is our students' work. They start with an introduction, and you can see from this example that there is nothing in here that couldn't have been written at GCSE. So no marks lost, but no credit gained, and time has been wasted from writing this introduction. Now let's look at their first paragraph. You can see they've used words from the question stem to clearly link to the title. I've underlined this. I've highlighted, as an examiner would, where we think their AO1 recall of content is and where their AO2 application that we will call discussion is. Now remember, this is an average essay that we are going to improve. So pause and have a read through. As you do, consider what A-level terminology has been used. So this student has done a great job of their AO1 recall and clearly linked to the question title. This is the standard of AO1 recall you should be aiming for. So many A-level key terms used here and used accurately. Now, AQA are very clear, however, that in the essay abbreviations should be written out in full in the first instance. So the student really should have written adenosine triphosphate and reduced NADP. For more information on the official abbreviations allowed and when to use them, check out the video in the details below. Now, looking at the AO2 discussion of wider importance, they have linked the importance of the energy transfers in the light-dependent reaction and molecules needed in the Calvin cycle and subsequent production for the food chain. I think they could have made the link a bit more explicit, but they've done a reasonable job here. If we had 4 paragraphs like this, I would give it a low relational mark band, maybe 16 to 17. However, you will see as we go on that this is our best paragraph. So this is an example where AO2 improvement of discussion is a feature that could limit marks. So how can we make this paragraph better? We can widen the synoptic discussion. Remember, synoptic means a comprehensive view of a whole subject. The glucose produced from the Calvin cycle has a wide-reaching impact, and we need to make a few A-level references to this. Glucose is required for glycolysis, the first step in producing ATP for energy release for many vital plant processes, including active load of the phloem, catalyzing peptide bond formation in translation, microtubule spindle formation in mitosis. Here we are broadening our discussion and linking to various topics with A-level detail, but we're making sure it's still all relevant to plants. I've highlighted the extra A-level in bold. So let's look at our second topic. Respiration is a separate reference number on the specification and still relevant to the title. So pause the video and read it through. We can see another clear link to the title using words from the question stem. Again, they have used great use of A-level detail in their AO1 recall. They haven't just talked about oxygen and glucose reacting to produce carbon dioxide, water, and releasing energy in the process, which would be very GCSE. There is an error. Did you spot it? The student should have written hydrogen ions are pumped across the membrane. Now, this would probably class as a minor error, as it could be considered a slip of the pen in a hurry, but it is scientifically inaccurate. The biggest problem with this paragraph, however, is that they have not written any wider AO2 discussion of importance other than Respiration cannot happen, which is important for survival. This is really all AO1 content. So let's improve it with another section of wider synoptic discussion, perhaps highlighting the importance of energy transfers in producing ATP to further release energy for co-transport of amino acids, breaking actin-myosin cross bridges to allow muscle contraction and maintaining the resting potential of neurons, both of which are needed for taxis and kinesis. Lots of different references to different areas of the specification in only a short section. So here is our third paragraph and another common mistake we see. Pause the video and have a read. Maybe you can spot the problem. So here we have good A-level AO1 recall of relevant energy transfers occurring in photoreceptors. They've used a good number of A-level terms. The problem here is that the AO2 discussion of wider importance isn't really a wide discussion at all. It is more recall of the process of muscle contraction, where they have done a mind blurt on their knowledge of muscle contraction. They haven't discussed the wider importance of photoreceptors and linked to multiple other topics. They've also included a major error when naming the ion that stimulates muscle contraction. Let's see what the AO2 discussion could have looked like. Here we could make brief links to a variety of A-level processes, including taxis, kinesis, courtship behaviour, and put it into the context of survival, reproduction, and evolution using the A-level key term gene pool. So here is our fourth chosen topic, linking energy transfer to ecosystems. So again, pause the video and consider how to improve the paragraph. So this is an example where the student has written at GCSE level. All of this could have been written after your GCSEs. There is AO1 recall and an attempt at discussion of wider importance, or AO2, but it's very vague and lacks A-level terminology. Now, ecology and ecosystems doesn't have as many additional A-level keywords as some other topics, but we do need to try carefully to include some. In the AO1, we could bring in the terms gross primary productivity and net primary productivity when referring to efficiency of trophic levels. We could also name the bacteria involved in cycling nitrogen, saprobionts and nitrifying bacteria, for example. We could refer to ammonification. Check out A-Level Study Leave Shorts number 21 for more advice on making ecosystems A-level. So let's look at the AO2 wider discussion and how we could improve it. Maybe we could link the limited amount of biomass which can exist at trophic levels to intraspecific and interspecific competition and carrying capacity. Competition can lead to evolution, speciation, succession, and biodiversity changes. So let's look back on the essay to establish a mark as an examiner would and summarise the quality of each topic. We've one paragraph with good AO1 recall and OK AO2 A-level discussion, two with good AO1 A-level recall, but the AO2 isn't enough A-level or isn't discussion. And then we've got one paragraph at GCSE level. If we compare this to our banding descriptors, we cannot say our AO2 is discussed mostly at A level. So we cannot put this essay in the relational band. So we are capped at 15. To place it within the multistructural band, let's see which points it meets. Biology recall is lacking depth. No, they did an okay job of this in 3 paragraphs. AO2 not addressed at A-level depth. I would largely agree with this. Some significant errors. Well, there was one major, one minor, so some could be an overstatement. At least 3 topics, yes. So to get 16, we would have to have 4 paragraphs with good AO1 and good AO2. And we have to consider that most paragraphs in this essay are not meeting sufficient AO2 depth at A level. But most paragraphs have good A level terminology in the AO1 recall, and there weren't too many errors. So I'm going to give this essay 13 out of 25 in the middle of the multistructural band. So before you apply what you've learned in the video, let's recall the key points that you are going to be looking for in the next paragraph. Clear links to the title using words from the question stem, A-level terminology in both AO1 recall and AO2 wider discussion. And the AO2 must be wider discussion of topic links, not a detailed recall of a related topic. Not the above processes cannot happen, and not a GCSE vague reference to survival and function. So let's apply what you've learned, have a look at this paragraph, and then try to improve it. So I'm sure you will probably agree that this paragraph is another example of GCSE, and it's really quite basic in its AO1 recall and its AO2 wider discussion. I'm sure you've made lots of lovely improvements and will continue to improve your essays as well. If you need further guidance with studying A-level biology, check out more SciBright biology videos from maths to common errors, abbreviations allowed, and more.